And we see reports in the newspapers that the president, the PNM president who preaches the gospel of the PNM, her husband has received $15 million in briefs from the PNM while sitting down, being paid by you, eating food paid for by you, liming and loving and drinking up things paid by you, and he's still, and two, remember when they get married, they make a like two candles and they put it into one, and two become one. But you all say that's okay. Now the paper's talking about, the newspaper's talking about, because the unions are in an uproar about the new head of the labor court, and they're suggesting that the president made the selection and there is some apparent bias there. Well, it's very interesting, my people, because when the UNC was saying it is totally inappropriate to put a sitting member of the ruling party in president's house, a card-carrying member of the PNM who preaches the gospel of the PNM, represented the PNM. Her last appointment was by the PNM to be president of the PNM-led Senate. And you put her there, it goes against the Constitution, the Senate power. The president has the power to appoint the Police Service Commission, the judge, the head of the Labor Court, the EBC, the Public Service Commission, the Teacher Service Commission, the Integrity Commission, and PNM, and OBIA in the PNM. The newspapers talking about independence and apparent bias and conflict of interests and separation of powers and what the framers of the Constitution thought they needed and so on. But they allow Rowley to thwart the Constitution at every point. They allowed him to appoint his own PNM president. They allowed him to interfere in the appointments and cause the collapse of the Independent Police Service Commission. They allowed Rowley to impact the meritless and choose his own commissioner of police. They allow Rowley to do as he pleases with any independent institution. They allow Rowley to attack and usurp the authority of the DPP by signing an indemnity with his Attorney General Faris Arawi, with Nelson, causing Nelson Gate, then going to claim that it was illegal and they negotiated in bad faith anyway. But diminishing the separation of powers, we see that Rowley attacks the DPP and the Chief Justice jumps in on Rowley's side when he should stay out of the fray. But the Chief Justice jumps in to attack the DPP on behalf of Rowley. And you all are now discussing that we need separation of powers. Rowley attacks the Integrity Commission, but then puts his president there to appoint the integrity commissioners. The independent senators are appointed. The first batch from 2020 to just a few months ago, boy, some of their contribution better than the PNM. Now you're seeing like they make a mistake because they appoint some independent senators who they thought might be PNM, but they seem so far to be more independent than the batch was there. They now have a joint select committee supposed to be chaired by an independent senator, Diurup Timal. When I do the research, because I find his decisions not making sense, he's going against logic. He's saying there's sub judice in the Senate, but in the joint select committee, no sub judice. So standing orders apply in the Senate and in the Parliament, but not in the parliamentary subcommittee. Makes no sense. Then when I research, Diurup Timal is a PNM on a PNM board with Uttara Rao in the EMBD. So when they're talking about, now here comes Guardian talking about justice must be seen as above partisan affiliations. The small size and closeness of family relationships, friends, business and political associates in this society continue to pose problems for not merely the fairness of actions taken by state officials, but the appearance of less than arm's length appointments to critical positions in the state institutional apparatus. Now, do you see how skillfully the Guardian tries to make an excuse for Rowley and the PNM, trying to say that our society is so small that you're bound to get a president whose husband get 15 million in brief. You're bound to get an attorney general in the cabinet who rents out his own building. He steps out of the cabinet and his cabinet colleagues rent out his own building for 3-year period, 23.6 million, going in his third set of 3 years, going up to 70 million, and they approved 38 million for him to outfit his own building. These people now see that. They don't see bias. They don't see conflict of interest. When Stuart Smallpin Young swears in on the Bible to be Rowley's K-Pax liquor and member and minister in the office of the Prime Minister, and before September 2015, the company that his brother Angus Smallpin Young was the CEO of, NCB Global, had no public sector work ever. And when Smallpin swear in just so, this company start to win. UDCOT 180 million first when Rowley moved UDCOT from under housing where Grabby Wabby was and Dillon was under the office of the Prime Minister. The first contract given to Angus Smallpin Young was from UDCOT under the office of the Prime Minister for 180 million. Within 5 years, he moved from 0 to 4.2 billion in public sector work. When Dr. Terence Farrell resigned and the Economic Development Board collapsed because they say Rowley don't listen to nobody except the Obia man. Well, they didn't say that, but we know that's who he listened to now. You know who Rowley replaced the Economic Development Board with? Richard Smallpin Young. And Richard Smallpin Young was also in charge of the IFC, getting 15 million a year for the last 8 years, and not one I come out in the F nor the C. Ewart Williams resigned and says nothing, stay quiet, because that is PNM Obia. Denise Deming resigned from the tourism chairman of the tourism company board, say nothing because it's PNM Obia. Nicola Oliveri get fired because she was checking out fake oil that was just coming out miraculously, like from Lake Otoa. Jambi was pulling it out. She get fired, say nothing because the PNM Obia. And you now realizing that separation of powers is important. You had Keith Rowley and Stuart Smallpin Young going down to Australia, meeting with CEOs, touring plants where they build ferries, walking around, meeting, eating shrimps and drinking scotch, then tell the two private companies to bid and send the bids to Stuart Smallpin Young and his ministerial committee, and they call that a tender, Hostal and Incat. And then they look at the Incat and Hostal bids. They see that Incat's bid was 10 million US less than Hostal. They contact Hostal and give them secret information of Incat, and so that Hostal could lower its bid. And then they hand out 1-1 and then buy 2 cutlass vessels. Y'all didn't say that that was wrong. When Kamala had 1 person to 1 board, 1 chairman to 1 board, that was corporate governance to reduce the opportunities for corruption. Rowley have Ingrid Lashley on 9 board. Ingrid Lashley was the woman when Kamala was trying to get Vasant Bharat to approve a 2% loan for first-time homeowners so people could buy house cheap. She refused to implement. She on 9 board and living next to Rowley in Inez Gate. Newman George on 6 board. Eustace Nancis on 7 board. Rowley personal attorney in charge of Heritage, where they had an investigation that's supposed to be going on all now into oil that just miraculously multiplied by the thousands of barrels per day. And now you're realizing that you need checks and balances to prevent corruption when the most corrupt government has been in place and is still in place with a web of corruption that spans the entire public sector. You have one man related to the president, Noel Garcia, no teeth, ugly self, in charge of building hospitals, airport, health facility, community center, fire stations, police stations, sporting stadium, recreation grounds, and every single house in Trinidad and Tobago. Noel Garcia in charge of Red House reconstruction and renovation, the magnificent seven President's House, Prime Minister residence in Tobago, all of these projects, billions of dollars, stadium repair, 90 million with $5 seats, the Skinner Park reduced the field from a football field to a sweat pitch. Noel Garcia and your media now discussing that corporate governance is necessary to prevent corruption and interlocking directorships are not good. You have called me but good friend Patrick Ferreira, who, when the lady Drayton, who was a former independent senator, they moved she from NIB to put Coleman but friend. He does ride in Jeep since 1977 with Patrick Ferreira, who have questions to answer about his former dabbling in insurance. Put him in charge of NIB. Put him in charge of Home Mortgage Bank. Put him in charge of TTM. That is a new call to heart. And now you all are discussing propriety, separation of powers.